places on this earth where the wind does not merely blow, but screams, carrying with it the secrets of those who dared to trespass into the domain of the wild. There are coordinates on our maps that seem to repel human life. Ancient landscapes where the laws of logic and survival are twisted by forces we still struggle to comprehend. In the winter of 1959, deep within the frozen heart of the Soviet Union, 9 experienced hikers walked into such a place, and none of them walked out. What was found weeks later on the slopes of Kolatsyakhl, a name which translates from the local Mansi language to the Mountain of the Dead, has fueled decades of nightmares, government cover-ups, and endless debate. It is a story of youth and ambition cut short by a terror so absolute that it forced 9 sensible people to slash their way out of their own shelter and run barefoot into the Arctic darkness. Welcome to DCF Investigations. Today, we are opening the file on the Dyatlov Pass Incident. To truly understand the gravity of this tragedy, we must first transport ourselves back to the atmosphere of the Soviet Union in the late 1950s. It was the era of the Khrushchev thaw, a time when the iron grip of Stalinism was slightly loosening, and a sense of optimism was beginning to permeate the younger generation. For university students, hiking and mountain trekking were not just hobbies, but a rigorous athletic discipline, state-sponsored and deeply respected. This was not a casual weekend camping trip. This was what was known as sports tourism. To achieve higher grades of certification, hikers had to complete routes of increasing difficulty and danger. The group that set out in January of 1959 was aiming for the highest certification available at the time, Grade 3. These were not amateurs. They were elite, tough, and resourceful young people who knew how to survive in the wilderness. The leader of the group was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a fifth-year radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Dyatlov was a natural leader, described by those who knew him as serious, focused, and incredibly talented in assembling radios and stove equipment for expeditions. He was the kind of young man who commanded respect without raising his voice. Joining him was a roster of equally impressive individuals. Zinaida Kolmogorova was 22, a radio engineering student and, by all accounts, the heart of the group, known for her outgoing personality and ability to lift spirits. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, was a robust and strong hiker who had previously dated Zinaida, though they remained close friends. Alexander Kolevatov, 24, was a nuclear physics student known for his meticulous nature. Rustem Slobodin, 23, was a quiet, athletic man who loved to play the mandolin by the campfire. Georgy Krivonishenko, 23, was a jovial engineer who had worked at the secret nuclear facility known as Chelyabinsk 40. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 23, was the son of a French communist repressed by Stalin, known for his energy and humor. Lyudmila Dubinina, the youngest at 20, was a strict and economical economics student who took her role as the group's treasurer very seriously. And then there was the outsider. Semyon Zolotaryov was significantly older than the others at 38. He was a veteran of the Great Patriotic War, a man with a mysterious background, strange tattoos, and a history that has led many researchers to suspect he may have had connections to intelligence agencies. He joined the group at the last minute, needing the Grade 3 certification for a promotion. His inclusion changed the dynamic, adding a layer of maturity and perhaps secrecy that would only become relevant in the retrospective analysis of the tragedy. The journey began on January 23, 1959. The group, originally consisting of 10 members, traveled by train to Ivdel, a town in the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast. From there, they took a truck to a remote settlement of loggers called Vizhai. It was the last outpost of civilization before the endless white expanse of the Ural Mountains. The atmosphere in the photographs they took during these early days is filled with laughter and camaraderie. We see them hugging, playing instruments, and joking with locals. They were young, strong, and felt invincible. However, fate intervened for one member of the group on January 28th. Yuri Yudin, a 21-year-old economics student, suffered a flare-up of chronic sciatica. The pain in his back and leg became unbearable, making it impossible for him to continue on the arduous trek. With a heavy heart, Yudin said goodbye to his friends at the settlement of Second North. He hugged Dyatlov, who told him they would likely return around February 12th, perhaps a few days later. Yudin turned back, the only member of the expedition who would live to tell the tale. He would spend the rest of his life haunted by the question of what happened to his friends, and by the survivor's guilt that shadowed his every step. For the remaining 9, the real challenge began. They skied across frozen rivers and through dense snow-covered forests. We can reconstruct their final days through the diaries they left behind and the rolls of film developed from the cameras found at the scene. The diaries reveal a group in high spirits, despite the plummeting temperatures and the hard labor of breaking trail in deep snow. They wrote about the beauty of the landscape, the local Mansi people they encountered signs of, and their nightly discussions by the stove. On January 31st, the group arrived at the edge of the highland area. They cached some of their food and extra equipment in the valley of the Auspia River, planning to retrieve it on their way back. This lightened their loads for the ascent. On February 1st, they began to move through the pass that would later bear their leader's name. The weather, however, was worsening. Visibility dropped, and the winds began to howl. It seems that due to the low visibility, they accidentally deviated west, moving away from the forest and up the exposed slope of Kolatsyakal. Realizing their mistake, they made a decision that has baffled experts for decades. Rather than skiing just 1 mile downhill to the safety and firewood of the forest, Dyatlov ordered the group to set up camp right there on the exposed, wind-blasted slope. Why did an experienced leader make such a choice? Some argue he didn't want to lose the altitude they had gained. Others suggest it was a training exercise to practice sleeping on a mountain slope. Whatever the reason, around 5 p.m. on February 1st, they dug a pit into the snow and pitched their large canvas tent. They ate a cold meal of ham and crackers. They did not unpack the stove, likely to conserve energy or because assembling it on the slope was too difficult. They took off their wet boots and heavy jackets, changing into softer clothes for sleep. The diaries end here. The final entry is a collaborative satirical newsletter they wrote called The Evening O Torten, filled with inside jokes. The mood was seemingly normal. They settled in for the night, 9 souls huddled together for warmth against the bitter Siberian cold. What happened next is a puzzle that defies easy explanation. Sometime during the night, something terrified the group so profoundly that they cut their way out of the tent. Forensic analysis of the tent canvas later revealed that the cuts were made from the inside. They did not unzip the entrance. They slashed the fabric instantly and frantically. In temperatures hovering around -25 degrees Celsius, or roughly -13 degrees Fahrenheit, they fled. They left behind their boots, their skis, their food, and their warm coats. Most were wearing only socks, long underwear, or a single light sweater. Footprints found the next day showed 8 or 9 sets of tracks moving down the slope towards the tree line, about a mile away. The tracks indicated a walking pace, not a frantic run, which adds another layer of bizarre contradiction to the panic suggested by the slashed tent. They walked calmly to their deaths. Back in civilization, the date of their expected return, February 12th, came and went. Families began to worry, but delays in such expeditions were common. It wasn't until February 20th, after relentless pressure from the families, that the Institute sent out the first rescue groups. The Army and police soon joined the search with planes and helicopters. On February 26th, a student volunteer named Mikhail Sharavin spotted the tent. It was half collapsed and covered in snow. When he peered inside, he found it empty. The items left behind, boots, money, cameras, alcohol, ruled out robbery. The hikers were gone. The searchers followed the footprints down the slope to the edge of the forest, near a large Siberian cedar tree. There, beneath the branches, they found the remains of a small fire and the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. They were stripped to their underwear, shoeless, and lying side by side. Their hands were burned, suggesting they had desperately tried to keep the fire going. The branches of the cedar tree were broken up to a height of 5 meters, implying that one of them had climbed up, perhaps to look for the tent or to spot a threat. Between the cedar tree and the tent, searchers found 3 more bodies: Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustim Slobodin. They were found at intervals of 150 meters, buried under the snow. Their poses suggested they were trying to crawl back up the slope towards the tent. Dyatlov was holding a birch branch, his face looking towards the camp. Zenaida was found further up, her skin discolored an orange hue that would later fuel conspiracy theories. Slobodin had a minor skull fracture, but not fatal. These 5 had died primarily of hypothermia. It took 2 more months to find the remaining 4 hikers. In May, as the snow began to melt, searchers probed a ravine about 75 meters further into the woods from the cedar tree. Buried under 4 meters of snow, deep in a creek bed, they found Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, and Alexander Kolevatov. The condition of these 4 bodies changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. Unlike the first group, who died of freezing, this group had sustained catastrophic internal injuries. Thibault-Brignoles had a major skull fracture. Both Dubinina and Zolotaryov had crushed chests with multiple broken ribs. The medical examiner compared the force required to cause such damage to that of a car crash. Yet, strangely, there were no external wounds. It was as if they had been squeezed by a giant hand. Even more horrifying were the soft tissue damages. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lip. Zolotaryov was also missing his eyes. While decomposition and scavenging by small animals could explain this, the image of the young woman without her tongue became the grisly emblem of the mystery. The investigation that followed was hasty and secretive. The official conclusion released by Soviet authorities in May 1959 was that the hikers had died due to a compelling natural force, which they were unable to overcome. The case was closed, the files were sent to a secret archive, and the area was declared off-limits to skiers for 3 years. This vague explanation, combined with the secrecy, created a vacuum that was instantly filled with rumors. Over the last 60 years, dozens of theories have been proposed, ranging from the plausible to the paranormal. To be truly exhaustive, we must examine the most prominent ones in detail. First, let us look at the military testing theory. This is one of the most enduring beliefs among those who lived in the era. During the search, other hiking groups in the region reported seeing strange, glowing orange spheres in the sky on the night of the incident. These reports were initially included in the investigation files, but were later downplayed. Some investigators later claimed they were pressured to ignore the glowing orbs. The theory suggests that the group may have been accidental victims of a Soviet missile test or the testing of a radiological weapon. This would explain the frantic escape. If they saw a rocket or a bright flash, they might have feared an explosion or avalanche. Supporting this theory is the fact that trace amounts of radiation were found on the clothes of 2 hikers, likely from the group found in the ravine. However, skeptics point out that the radiation levels were low and could be attributed to laboratory contamination or the fact that Krivonishenko worked at a nuclear facility. Yet, the orange skin noted on the bodies during the funerals keeps this theory alive in the minds of many. Then there is the espionage theory, often centered around Semyon Zolotaryov. Proponents of this narrative suggest that Zolotaryov, the older outsider, was a KGB agent or a double agent. The theory posits that he was meant to meet foreign agents, perhaps from the CIA in the mountains, to perform a controlled delivery of radioactive samples, hence the radiation on the clothes. The meeting went wrong. The spies realized they were being tricked, and they murdered the group. This theory attempts to explain the strange injuries as torture or professional elimination methods. However, it lacks concrete evidence and relies heavily on the mysterious nature of Zolotaryov's background. Another theory involves the local indigenous people, the Mansi. Initially, investigators suspected that the Mansi might have attacked the hikers for trespassing on sacred land. However, this was quickly ruled out. The Mansi were peaceful, had good relations with hikers, and the mountain was not considered a sacred taboo site where entry was forbidden. Furthermore, there were no footprints other than those of the hikers, and no signs of hand-to-hand combat. The fatal injuries were internal, not consistent with a physical brawl involving knives or clubs. We must also address the more exotic theories. The Menk, or the Russian Yeti. The Ural Mountains have a rich folklore concerning wild men. Some point to a photo in Thibaut Brignol's camera that shows a blurry, dark figure near the trees. While most analysts agree this is likely a human figure or shadow, cryptozoologists argue it is proof of a creature that scared the group from the tent and crushed the ribs of the ravine group. While compelling for fiction, there is zero physical evidence, no hair, no tracks, no scat, to support the existence of a Yeti. Infrasound is another scientific theory that gained traction. This phenomenon occurs when wind blows over specific terrain, creating a low-frequency sound wave that is inaudible to the human ear, but can cause physical and psychological effects, including nausea, dread, and panic. It is known as the Kármán Vortex Street. If the wind hitting the dome of Kolatsyakal created such a frequency, it could explain why the group felt an overwhelming, irrational terror that forced them to cut the tent and flee. Once they were out in the cold, the panic subsided, but hypothermia had already set in. However, in recent years, modern science has attempted to provide a definitive answer. In 2019, the Russian Prosecutor General's office reopened the investigation. In 2020, they concluded that the cause was an avalanche. But not just any avalanche. This has always been a contentious theory because the slope was not steep enough for a typical avalanche, and the tent was still standing, albeit collapsed. The new explanation involves a slab avalanche. The theory is that when the group cut into the snow to pitch their tent, they destabilized a slab of snow above them. Later that night, fueled by strong katabatic winds, a small but incredibly heavy block of compacted snow broke loose and slid down onto the tent. This impact would explain the crushed ribs of the hikers who were lying on that side of the tent, acting as a human shield for the others. According to this theory, the group, trapped and injured in the dark under the snow, cut their way out. Fearing a second, larger avalanche, they grabbed the injured and evacuated to the tree line. They couldn't stay at the tent because it was buried and unsafe. Once at the cedar tree, they tried to start a fire. The two at the fire died of hypothermia. The others tried to return to the tent for supplies, but froze on the way. The final group, seeking shelter from the wind, went into the ravine, where the snow eventually buried them deep, and the pressure of the snow over months caused further bone fractures. The missing eyes and tongue are attributed to decomposition and scavenging by microorganisms and small animals in the wet creek bed. While the slab avalanche theory is the most scientifically robust explanation we have, supported by computer models from Swiss researchers who simulate snow dynamics for Disney movies, it still fails to satisfy everyone. It doesn't fully explain the radiation. It doesn't explain why experienced hikers would leave the tent without boots if the avalanche was small enough that they could extract themselves. It doesn't explain the lack of avalanche debris found by the first searchers 3 weeks later. The wind could have scoured it away. We must also consider the psychological horror of that night. Imagine the darkness. The wind is screaming. You are half-dressed. Your friends are dying. You are a mile from your shelter and you have no shoes. The tragedy of the Dyatlov Pass is not just in the mystery of the force that killed them, but in the prolonged, agonizing struggle for survival that followed. The autopsy of Rustem Slobodin showed his knuckles were bruised and swollen. He had been fighting something, or perhaps beating his hands against the frozen ground in frustration. The fire at the cedar tree was small. They were breaking branches with their bare hands, climbing the tree with frozen limbs to snap off kindling. The sheer will to live displayed by these young people is heartbreaking. The legacy of the Dyatlov Pass Incident is immense. It has spawned books, movies, video games, and thousands of internet forums. It represents the ultimate locked room mystery, but set in the vastness of nature. It taps into our primal fear of the unknown, the idea that even with preparation, skill, and companionship, we can be extinguished by forces we cannot control. The Dyatlov Foundation, run by friends and family of the victims, continues to reject the avalanche theory. They believe the government is still hiding the truth about a military accident. They point to the discrepancies in the case files, the missing pages, and the odd behavior of the officials in 1959. For them, the case is not closed. As we look back on the events of 1959, we are left with a mosaic of facts that form a picture of terror. We have a slashed tent. We have 9 bodies. We have radiation, missing eyes, and a government cover-up. We have a mountain that kept its secret for over 60 years. Whether it was a rare natural phenomenon like a slab avalanche or infrasound, or something darker involving state secrets, the result remains the same. 9 bright lives were extinguished in the cold, leaving behind a silence that echoes louder than the wind on the mountain of the dead. This case forces us to confront the fragility of human life against the indifference of nature. It reminds us that there are still corners of this world where civilization's rules do not apply. The hikers of the Dyatlov group were looking for adventure, for the thrill of the climb. Instead, they found a mystery that would immortalize them in the most tragic way possible. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the archives. This has been a production of DCF Investigations. We have walked the timeline, examined the forensics, and explored the theories. Now, I turn the question over to you. Do you believe modern science has finally solved the riddle with the slab avalanche theory? Or do you believe the truth lies in the redacted files of the Soviet military? What do you think forced them to cut that tent? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep watching the shadows.